So this week, I received a comment on YouTube that made me stop and think. Not because I agreed with it or disagreed with it, but because it reminded me how quickly we all make assumptions. We hear one sentence or one clip, an opinion, and before we ask a single question, we've already written the rest of the story in our minds. Why is that so easy for us? Why is it easier to assume than to ask? Welcome to Unpolished by Cold. I'm Catherine Schaefer. So we naturally fill in the blanks. So in Proverbs 18:13, the Bible says, "He that answers a matter before he heareth it, it is folly and shame unto him." It is true, isn't it? And we like to, well, it's not that we like to, I think our brains just naturally do that. I know for myself, I think over the last couple of years it's gotten better. But even reading that comment on YouTube, I realized that instantly I started to create almost like a little story about what this person might have been going through. Like if there was loss or maybe they were trolling me. And then I was like, well, maybe it was coming from hurt and loss and trauma. And I start to create this whole backstory for this person. So, because our brains hate incomplete information, so we create the missing pieces. And sometimes we're right, but a lot of times we're not because we don't have the full story. We really don't. Sure, we can play detective and we can look at their social media if they have it attached to their accounts, or we can look at what accounts they do have attached, and we can do all that work to figure it out. But we'll never truly have the full story because they only let us see what they let us see. And we know on social media, it's very curated, very curated. Um, and we know a 1 minute reel becomes someone's entire theology, right? I mean, let's be realistic. Can you really know someone's entire way of thinking by watching 1 minute reel and knowing their entire story? Or if somebody says one sentence, like for me, I post a lot of clips, I post a lot of reels, and somebody may never ever watch any of my actual episodes, and that's fine. I have a few people like that, and they will comment on my reels, and they will never watch any of my episodes, but they make assumptions on those reels about my entire character, having never watched my actual episodes. Now, those reels are between 30, 60 minutes long, or 60 minutes, 60 seconds long. Can you really know someone's character based on those little tiny clips during an entire conversation that you're having with them? I don't think so. But we can fill in the blanks. We can sure fill in those gaps. So we have to, I think, those assumptions almost always begin with incomplete information. And we have to watch our own hearts. Um, we have to really watch our own hearts because I know I've fallen into those traps very quickly. I know when uh, I have gotten approached outside of here, outside of my little bubble, um, and asked, "Oh, did you see my comment?" And things like that, and I'm like, "Yeah." Um, but I always tell people the real is 1 minute, the full conversation is 25, because there seems to be a misconception that the full story is in the 1 minute clip. It's not. You can't get a full story out of a couple of sentences and comments or a 1 minute clip or when somebody speaks out of anger or hurt. That's not a full story. Um, and it's not being defensive or anything. It's just an observation. Because we all do it, right? We do it with news headlines, right? We see something on the news headlines. We may never read the full story. We love the news headlines because that's the hook, right? We love the news headlines. Something dramatic happens, and we're like, "What?" And then we see the news article is like 3 pages long. We're like, "Oh, that's too much to read." But then we're like, "Oh, did you see that news article?" And then we fill in the blanks, right? Facebook posts, same thing. We see like the starting, like maybe the first like paragraph, which is always the hook, and it's sometimes very misleading because it's the best part. Like it's the hook, and sometimes it's written in a way that's very misleading. And then down below is the full story, which then like explains it more in detail, and it's actually not what you think at all. Anyways, um, because we think we know the whole story. It's very deceiving. The world is very deceptive, but we have to be careful not to assume things. And Jesus dealt with assumptions constantly, right? People assumed he broke the Sabbath. He was a glutton. He was possessed. He was blaspheming. He associated with sinners because he approved of sin. But they rarely stopped to ask. They never asked him why, or like they never stopped to ask him. And we don't do that even today. Like we don't ask. And that's something I'm learning is to ask more questions. So this person on my channel, I did stop and ask, more questions. Um, I did because I didn't want to just assume that they were trolling me, which would have been a fair assumption, but then it could have also been an incorrect one. And then I didn't want to just assume that, oh, they must have had like church hurt or a loss or whatever assumption I might have made. So I asked questions because I can't give a good response or any response really if I don't know where you're coming from or the other person. I don't know how to respond to you if I don't know not your full story. I don't need your life story. I just need to know your intentions with the question. I need to know if you're trolling, if it's even worth answering. I need to know if it's coming from a hurt place, a curious place, if it's coming from a place where you want to engage in an actual conversation, if you're coming from a place of I'm curious and I have questions, if it's coming from a place of let's have an actual engagement conversation, or this is my stance and nothing's going to change my mind. Those are all very different conversations we're going to have depending on where you are coming from. And that's fine. I'm open to all those, but I need to know what frame of mind you are in to have that conversation. Because obviously, if you're trolling, I'm not going to engage. There's no point. Um, if you're curious, if you're not a Christian, if you are a Christian, there's the conversations are going to change the format a little bit, um, you know, doctrine, starting point, etc. So there's certain ways, certain questions that have to be asked, but there has to be questions that have to be asked. And I don't want to assume that, oh, you must be a Christian and you had church hurt and now you're taking it out of me or fill in some sort of crazy blank or gap that is might not be true at all. Or you're trolling me and so I'm just gonna block you and ignore you. And you might actually genuinely need somebody and you're reaching out. I don't want to do that either. And then push you further away from Jesus. I don't want to do that ever. So we have to ask questions. Absolutely. So that's kind of the place where I'm trying to come from, because having these platforms, we are stewarding something important. It's not just, oh, I have a platform, I have a podcast, I have social media, I have all these things. I have been entrusted with something important, and I don't take it lightly. And I think that's the first and foremost is that this has been entrusted to me by God. And I'm not saying I'm super important. I'm just saying I don't take this lightly, and I always want to make sure I'm stewarding it well. And I'm glorifying and edifying God at every turn. So I always want to be careful that I'm not saying or doing the wrong thing. And that's very important to me. And if I ever come across that way that I'm doing the wrong thing, it does hurt my heart. And I always want to make sure I'm correcting it. Because I do feel like it's why I always encourage everyone to ask questions. And so when that question did come across the comments, I was absolutely like, okay, what is the best way to answer this question? And it took me a long time to answer. One, we were in different time zones. Um, it looked like we were almost across the pond from each other. Just the way we were both answering, like almost 12 hours time difference, 12 to 16 hours. So it looked like we were quite a ways away from each other. But I also took my time because I wanted to make sure I prayed on it. I really gave it good thought. Um, my heart was in it. I steward the answers well, and I made sure that God was in the answers no matter what answer I gave. And so it was very important to me to not just rush into an answer and just give one glibly. Because questions build bridges, that's the heart of it. I don't want to ever just say I know why they did that. I don't ever want to just give a blank answer or assume an answer. I always want to say, or I always want to try asking, what did you mean? Can you explain? I might be misunderstanding. I always want to give like a chance for clarification. Um, because one honest question can undo 10 false assumptions. I always want to give the other person a chance to clarify themselves because if I read something and even though that person might be very well written and spoken and I still might misunderstand something or might not be my brain might just not might not understand, and that's okay too. Or maybe it's the way it's written, or who knows. So it's okay that if I ask, like, hey, right here when you said this, what did you mean? You know, so I always want to make sure that I ask enough clarifying questions for myself that I understand what the person is speaking about because they know what they're talking about, obviously. I don't. And that is something that I need to understand. So I can't get mad for them not speaking clearly. I absolutely have to make sure that I understand. So I think that's very important because curiosity is an act of humility. We have to stay curious. We have to stay humble. We have to make sure that we ask questions. We can't just run into the assumption train. Absolutely. I think this world assumes way too much. We assume everything, and then everyone gets in trouble. Fights break out. Anyways, everybody just assumes things. And then sometimes asking questions requires admitting, like, I don't actually know. I don't know how many times I've had a conversation with somebody and they've asked question after question after question. And then it finally comes down to like where I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I know this much. And then over here, like, I don't know. I don't know that part. I can help you up to this point, and then I don't know. We're gonna have to figure it out from that point on. And that's okay too, right? And I'm okay at this point in my life not knowing things. It's okay. I wish I would have figured that out sooner. And so I hope for all my listeners, um, I pray that the Lord puts it in your heart that it's okay to not know everything. It's impossible to know everything. Just FYI. I know it's uncomfortable to not know everything because the world it tells you that you have to know everything. It's literally impossible to know everything. Just let you know, it's impossible to know everything. That's why we have. I mean, the world now has Google and Chat GPT and AI, and you can literally just look it up. So it's not like you don't know everything. It's not like you can't figure it out. You have the resources. But in that moment, you might be like, I don't know right now, but give me like 5, 10 minutes. I'll tell you. You know what I mean? But it's much easier to assume than to admit we might be missing information. But when it comes to other people, don't assume. Would you want somebody to do that? I mean, I wouldn't want somebody to do that to me. I've had it done to me where somebody assumed my story, my life, and I was extremely upset about it. I mean, not like that upset because I really didn't care. I'm at that age now. When you guys all get to my age, you'll understand. I'm at the age now where I don't care what people think about me. But I know when I was younger, I very much cared what people thought about me. Um, or maybe it's just because I have Jesus in my life. I don't actually know. But I know the only opinion that matters to me now is Jesus Christ. So that helps. But I can tell you this much. It still doesn't feel good having somebody make up stories about you or fill in the gaps about you. And you're just like, what? Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that about myself. Tell me more. Right? I mean, what is happening in the world? So don't put missing information out there about other people. Don't fill in the gaps. I mean, it's not nice. Nobody wants that. You don't want it. I don't want it. Nobody wants it. So let's stop doing that. It's not pleasant for nobody. So we're gonna close with scripture, James 1:19. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. It's one of my favorites. And of course, if you are looking for more than podcast episodes, I also send weekly emails called Walking It Out with Catherine. And oh my goodness, what is happening? I'm having technical issues. Give me a second. And you can subscribe for free through my website at catherineschafer.com using the link below. And don't forget to hit the follow and subscribe button so we can stay connected for more of these conversations. All right, my friends, this week's reminder this week reminded me that reminder I'm struggling today. This has been a week. If you're following me on social media, Catherine Schaefer on Facebook, I will be touching on that topic. If you're following me on Facebook, follow me. Some wild stuff happened last week, this week. It's still happening. Anyways, follow me. Crazy stuff. Struggle is real. So this week reminded me that asking question isn't weakness. Sometimes it's wisdom. Maybe before we decide what someone meant, before we decide why they did something, before we fill in the blanks ourselves, we should simply ask. We may discover the story was very different than the one we created in our own minds. Thank you, friends, for sitting with me again this week or today. I will see you again in a couple days. Otherwise, love you, friends. Thanks for being with me at Unpolished but Called through the chaos. Love you, friends. God bless.